Imagine a love so powerful it could defy an ancient prophecy. But at what cost? He's a cursed alpha, destined for destruction until she appears. This isn't just a love story. It's a battle against fate itself. Can their forbidden bond truly rewrite his doomed destiny, or will his darkness consume them both? The prophecy was older than the stones that crowned the ridge. They said the land remembered it, that when the wind slid through the broken pillars and hollowed arches of the ancient ruins, it whispered the same words it had whispered 1,000 years ago. Words of blood, fire, of an alpha born beneath a dying moon, fated to rise, rule, and ruin everything he touched. Alaric stood among those ruins now, boots crunching against gravel and bone dust, the night pressing down on his shoulders like a hand that had never loosened its grip. He had been a boy the first time he heard the prophecy spoken aloud. Too young to understand destiny, too proud to believe in curses. Now the words lived inside him like a second spine, unbendable, unforgiving. When the Black Alpha claims his crown, the pack will prosper. When the Black Alpha loves, the world will bleed. And when he chooses himself over fate, all things will fall. The symbols were carved deep into the stone circle before him. Spirals intersected by slashes, a crowned wolf rendered in sharp, violent lines, its chest split open by a blade that looked uncomfortably human. Candles burned low at the base of each pillar, their flames trembling as if afraid to exist too brightly in a place like this. Alaric's jaw tightened. He was not a wolf. None of them were. Not truly. They were men and women who carried old beliefs in their bones, who wrapped leadership in animal myth because it made power easier to obey. Wolfa. Words heavy with ritual, with expectation. Words that turned human choices into divine commands. And yet the prophecy had never been wrong. Not when his father died young, struck down by illness the elders claimed was the first toll of the curse. Not when drought came the year Alaric took leadership, cracking the earth and forcing the pack to ration water like criminals stealing from the future. Not when betrayal bloomed inside his council, one lie at a time, each loss tightening the invisible snare around his life. He exhaled slowly, breath fogging the air. From the ridge, the pack settlement sprawled below, fires flickering, roofs clustered close together as if warmth alone could protect them from fate. He had built this place with his hands and his will. Negotiated alliances, broken rivals, kept the people fed when the land turned mean. And still they looked at him like a weapon that might misfire. The Alpha's curse had a way of isolating him without chains. He ate alone more often than not. Slept lightly, always listening for footsteps outside his door. Even intimacy had become a calculated risk. Desire was dangerous, the elders warned, attachment a spark near dry grass. So Alaric learned restraint. He learned how to lead with iron calm, how to bury want beneath duty, how to let loneliness settle into him like a second skin. Melancholy followed him everywhere, a low, constant hum beneath his thoughts, like distant music played for a funeral that never quite ended. Tonight the hum was louder. The ruins were supposed to offer clarity. That was what the elders claimed when they insisted he come alone. Insisted the ritual required solitude. No guards, no witnesses. Just the Alpha and the weight of what he was meant to become. Or destroy. He knelt at the center of the stone circle, pressing his palm to the cold earth. The ground smelled of rain and ash, of endings layered atop beginnings. He closed his eyes not in prayer but in endurance. I'm here, he thought. Have always been here. Memories surfaced unbidden, faces of those who had trusted him, followed him, feared him. Children who went quiet when he passed. Lovers who never stayed. Friends who chose distance over loyalty because proximity to him felt like standing too close to a cliff edge. Leadership had given him everything except peace. A gust of wind cut through the ruins, sharp and sudden. The candles flickered violently, one extinguishing with a hiss. Alaric's eyes snapped open. For a moment the world felt off. Not dangerous, not hostile, expectant. His pulse slowed then skipped. It was ridiculous, he told himself. The elders spoke of signs and omens because humans hated uncertainty. Wind was wind. Silence was silence. Meaning was something people stitched onto chaos to feel less afraid. And yet, he rose slowly, every instinct alert. The air carried something unfamiliar. Not scent exactly, not sound. Shift. As if the night itself had turned its head. Somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the settlement and the guarded paths, a presence brushed against the edge of his awareness. Gentle, steady, incongruous against the prophecy's violence. Hope was a dangerous thing. The prophecy spoke of love as the catalyst of ruin. Of a mate who would undo him, not by betrayal, but by belonging. Alaric had always imagined that figure as a storm. Dramatic, devastating, impossible to ignore. This felt nothing like a storm. It felt like a quiet hand hovering just short of his chest. He swallowed, forcing himself to breathe evenly. You are tired, he thought. That is all. Still, he could not shake the sense that something had shifted irreversibly, like a door opening in a house long sealed shut. He turned back to the carvings, tracing the crowned wolf with his eyes. You don't own me, he said aloud, voice rough against the stones. The words echoed, thin and defiant. The ruins did not answer. But the night seemed to listen. Far away, unseen and unnamed, the one the prophecy called inevitable took a step closer to his world. Not with thunder, not with fire, but with a heartbeat that would soon learn the rhythm of his name. And for the first time since the curse had wrapped itself around his life, Alaric felt something dangerously unfamiliar stir beneath the weight of destiny. Not fear. Anticipation. The first time Alaric saw her, the world did not explode. Narrowed. The market square was loud that morning. Too loud. Metal rang against metal. Merchants argued over grain weights. Children darted between stalls like sparrows with dirt-streaked faces. Life, unbothered by prophecy, carrying on with its irritating insistence. Alaric moved through it with practiced distance, hood drawn low, presence bending the crowd without effort. People stepped aside instinctively, eyes lowering, backs straightening. Ulfa. He hated the way the word followed him like a shadow. He was halfway across the square when the noise thinned, not suddenly, but perceptibly, like breath being held. Alaric slowed, instincts tightening. His hand brushed the knife at his belt, not from fear but habit. Then he felt it. That same quiet pressure from the ruins. That hovering sense of near. He looked up. She stood at the edge of the square, half hidden by a spice merchant's canopy, as if the world itself had tried and failed to keep her unnoticed. She wore plain traveling clothes, dust on her boots, a satchel slung across her shoulder. Nothing about her should have mattered. Everything about her did. Her hair was dark, pulled back loosely, strands escaping to brush her jaw when the breeze shifted. Her face was calm but alert, eyes scanning the square with a sharpness that spoke of self-reliance, not fear. When her gaze lifted and met his, the narrowing completed, Alaric stopped walking. It was not desire. Not recognition in the way songs described mates and destiny. It was something colder and deeper, like two truths colliding and refusing to look away. Her eyes widened slightly, breath-catching. Just once. Then her expression shuttered, control snapping into place. She broke eye contact first. The square rushed back into sound. Alaric realized his heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. Impossible, he told himself. He did not believe in fated mates, not truly. The prophecy spoke of love as an event, a catastrophe, not a woman buying spices in his market. And yet his body reacted as if something ancient had been woken with a single glance. He forced himself to move again, steps deliberate, jaw clenched. Do not turn around. He turned around. She was still there, watching him now openly. Not longing. Not awe. Calculation. That unsettled him more than fear ever could. They collided moments later near the well. Not dramatically, not clumsily. Just a misjudged step, a shoulder brushing his chest. Alaric steadied her automatically, hand closing around her forearm. The contact hit him like a blade under the ribs. Her skin was warm, solid, real, a human anchor in a world built on myth. He felt her inhale sharply, felt the tension snap through her body as if she'd touched a live wire. "Sorry," she said quickly, voice low, controlled. She pulled her arm free at once, too fast to be coincidence. Their eyes met again. Up close, he saw the faint scar near her left brow, the way she held herself ready to move, to run if needed. Not fragile, not naive, dangerous in a quiet way. "You're not from here," he said before he could stop himself. Her lips pressed together. "Neither are you," she replied, and something in her tone suggested she knew exactly who he was. That should have ended it. Instead, something coiled tighter inside him. "I am Alaric," he said. The name landed between them like a test. She did not bow, did not step back. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Recognition, perhaps, or resignation. "I know," she said. Silence stretched. People flowed around them, careful not to interrupt. The Alpha and the stranger, suspended in a moment that felt too large for a marketplace. "I'm Elyra," she added after a beat. The name settled into him with disturbing ease. Elyra. The prophecy did not name her. Never named the mate. Only spoke of when he loves. As if love were a switch flipped by fate, not a choice made by two unwilling people. "I don't think this is a good place to talk," Alaric said. Her brow arched slightly. "I wasn't planning on talking to you at all. Honest. He almost smiled. "And yet," he said. "And yet," she echoed, eyes flicking briefly to the guards watching from the perimeter. "Your reputation makes refusal complicated." There it was. The forbidden edge. Whatever this was between them, it was already dangerous. Not because of desire, but because the world would not allow neutrality. "Walk with me," he said. Not a command. An invitation. She hesitated. He could see the internal conflict play out. Logic versus instinct, caution versus something older. When she nodded, it was once clipped. They walked. The path toward the outer ridge was quieter, the air cooler. Alaric was acutely aware of the space between them, of how his stride adjusted unconsciously to match hers. He hated that his body recognized her so easily. "You came alone," he said. "I prefer it that way. You knew who I was." "Yes. And still you stayed." She glanced at him then, eyes dark. "So did you." They stopped near the tree-line, far enough from the settlement to speak freely. Birds scattered as they approached, the forest alive with unseen movement. "You shouldn't be here," Alaric said quietly. "This place is not kind to those who attract attention." Her mouth curved, not in amusement but resolve. "Neither are prophecies." The word landed like a blow. He turned fully toward her now. "Who sent you?" "No one." "Then why are you here?" Elyra met his gaze without flinching. "Because something is wrong with the story you've all been telling yourselves." A dangerous answer. The wind stirred, leaves whispering overhead. Alaric felt the weight of the prophecy press down harder, as if angered by her defiance. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," he said. "I understand curses," she replied softly. "And I understand what happens when people stop questioning them." The silence between them was thick with things unsaid. With want, yes, but also warning. Alaric took a step back. "This can't happen," he said, more to himself than to her. "Whatever you think you feel, it's a mistake." Elyra's expression tightened, something wounded flashing beneath her composure. "I didn't come here looking for you." "Good," he said harshly. "Then leave before this becomes something neither of us can outrun." For a moment he thought she might argue. Instead she nodded slowly. "If destiny were that easy to avoid," she said, "you wouldn't look like a man already losing a war." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees without looking back. Alaric stood there long after she was gone, heart racing, chest aching with something dangerously close to hope. Prophecy stirred, and for the first time it felt afraid. Elyra did not leave. Alaric knew this before any guard reported a stranger at the outer lodges, before the council murmured about a woman asking careful questions, before the land itself seemed to lean subtly in her direction. He knew because the quiet inside him never returned. For 3 nights after the market, sleep abandoned him. When it came in fragments, it brought dreams that tasted like iron and rain. Ruins collapsing, hands reaching for his, a voice calling his name from just beyond sight. Each time he woke, his chest felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been briefly restored and then torn away again. He told himself it was the prophecy tightening its grip. That was easier than admitting the truth. On the 4th morning, he found her by the river. The water cut through the lowlands like a silver wound, fast-moving and cold, its banks lined with smooth stones worn down by time and patience. Elyra knelt near the edge, sleeves rolled, hands submerged as she rinsed dust from her palms. Her hair had come loose, dark strands clinging to her neck. She sensed him before he spoke. "I wondered how long it would take," she said, straightening without turning around. "You shouldn't be here," Alaric replied, the words reflexive now, stripped of conviction. "And yet," she said again, softer this time. She faced him, eyes searching his with unsettling familiarity. Up close, the restraint he'd mistaken for indifference revealed itself as something far more dangerous. Discipline. Elyra was a woman who had learned to survive by choosing her battles carefully. "You stayed," he said. "So did you," she answered. They stood in silence, the river filling the space between them. Alaric was acutely aware of how exposed they were, how easily this moment could be twisted into rumor, into accusation. The pack watched him constantly. Any deviation from the path destiny had carved for him was noted, catalogued, judged. "People will talk," he said. "They already do." He frowned. "You've been asking questions. I've been listening. That's worse." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Truth usually is." He should have sent her away. Ordered it. Used the authority he wielded like a blade. Instead he found himself asking, "What did you hear?" "That you're cursed," she said simply. "That your love will destroy you. That the land bends but never breaks for men like you. It only waits." His jaw tightened. And that you believe it." The accusation landed cleanly. "I've seen enough," he said. "People suffer when they get too close." Elyra stepped nearer. Not into his space. Just close enough that he could feel her warmth, smell the faint trace of soap and river water on her skin. "Or," she said quietly, "they suffer because they're taught to fear choice." Something in him bristled. "You think this is about philosophy?" "I think it's about power," she replied. "And who benefits when you're alone?" Before he could answer, voices echoed from the far bank. 2 men emerged from the tree-line, pack members, both familiar. They slowed when they saw Alaric, eyes flicking immediately to Elyra. Suspicion sharpened the air. "Alpha," one of them greeted, bowing his head. "We didn't know you were out here." "I am," Alaric said coolly. Their gazes lingered on Elyra, assessing, measuring threat. "This is Elyra," Alaric said after a moment. "She's passing through." Her eyes cut to him, surprised by the half-lie. But she said nothing. "Passing through," the other man repeated. "That's so." "Yes," Alaric said. "You may go." They hesitated, then obeyed, retreating with looks that promised questions later. When they were gone, Elyra exhaled slowly. "That's what you call passing through. It keeps them from asking worse questions." "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you tell yourself?" He didn't answer. They began walking along the river, parallel but not touching. Every step felt like defiance, not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. Each moment spent together contradicted the story carved into stone, the one that insisted inevitability was stronger than will. "You didn't tell me why you came," Alaric said at last. Elyra's gaze stayed on the water. Because I've spent my life cleaning up the aftermath of prophecies. That made him look at her sharply. Explain. I was raised near a temple, she said. One that thrived on visions and warnings. People came desperate for answers, and the elders gave them certainty instead. Lives were ruined because someone was told ruin was coming. Her voice tightened just slightly. My sister believed them. He felt the shift immediately. The grief beneath her words. She made choices out of fear, Elyra continued. Gave up the man she loved. Stayed where she was told she'd be safe. And when the tragedy came anyway, they said it proved the prophecy right. Alaric stopped walking. Elyra turned to face him. It wasn't destiny, she said. It was obedience. The truth of it struck too close to home. You think you're immune, she went on. That your isolation protects them. But all you're doing is fulfilling the part they wrote for you. His chest felt tight. You don't know what happens when I stop resisting. I think you're afraid to find out. The words burned because they were true. That night, the betrayal came quietly. A council member, one he'd trusted for years, approached him after the evening meal, voice low, concern carefully rehearsed. There were rumors, he said. The woman was dangerous. Outsiders always were. Perhaps it would be wise to detain her for questioning. For safety. For the pack, the man had said. Alaric saw the fear beneath the righteousness. Fear of change. Fear of being wrong. No, Alaric replied. She's under my protection. The shock was immediate. By morning, Elyra was gone. Not by choice. They found her at the old storehouse, wrists bound, blood at her temple where she'd been struck. Someone had acted without permission, convinced they were preventing catastrophe. Alaric snapped. The confrontation was brutal, fast, public. Authority stripped bare. Consequences delivered without mercy. When he freed her, his hands shook. Not with rage, but with the terrifying realization of how close he'd come to losing her. I told you to leave, he said hoarsely as he cut the bindings. Elyra looked up at him, eyes bright with pain and something fiercer. You told me you believed the story. He had no answer. That night, they sat together in silence, backs against the storehouse wall, the pack buzzing with unrest around them. The stars were sharp overhead, cold and indifferent. This changes everything, Alaric said finally. Yes, Elyra replied. That's the point. He turned to her then, really looked at her. Not as fate's instrument, not as danger, but as a woman choosing him despite the cost. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a promise. But somewhere deep in the bones of the world, the prophecy cracked. Just a little. Enough to let hope breathe. The pact changed the way a body does when sickness sets in quietly. Nothing dramatic announced it. No open revolt. No raised blades or shouted accusations. Just a subtle tightening. Voices lowering when Alaric entered a room, conversations pausing half a beat too long, eyes tracking Elyra with careful calculation instead of curiosity. Suspicion had teeth. Alaric felt it everywhere. In the council chamber, where chairs once angled toward him now formed imperfect lines. In the training yard, where warriors struck harder than necessary, as if trying to beat sense into a future they feared. Even in the way food was served. Portions measured, generosity replaced by caution. Leadership had taught him to recognize unrest before it spoke aloud. This unrest whispered. Elyra sensed it too. She moved through the settlement with deliberate neutrality, neither shrinking nor asserting herself. She helped where she could, mending nets, sharing knowledge of herbs, listening more than she spoke. It should have earned her goodwill. Instead, it made her dangerous. She's winning them over, one councilman muttered during a closed meeting. She's distracting him, another said. She's accelerating the prophecy, said a third voice trembling with conviction. Alaric sat at the head of the table, hands folded, face unreadable. Each accusation slid over him like rain over stone, but inside something coiled tight. Not anger, fear. not of Elyra, but of what the pack might do to protect a story that kept them comfortable. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment," Elder Marek said at last. He was the oldest among them, voice cracked with age but sharp with authority. "You know what the prophecy says." "I know what it claims," Alaric replied. "Not what it proves." Marek leaned forward. "Every sign aligns. The drought, the unrest. Now her." Silence followed. Elyra was not present. Alaric had insisted she stay away from council gatherings. For her safety, he'd said. The truth was uglier. He did not trust the restraint of men who believed righteousness justified cruelty. "She is not a sign," Alaric continued. "She is a person. A person who arrived at the exact moment the curse began to stir again," another councilman countered. "That is not coincidence. Coincidence is just causality we don't understand yet," Alaric said coldly. That ended the discussion. Or so he thought. The first betrayal came that night. Alaric woke to the sound of steel leaving its sheath. He rolled from the bed just as the blade struck where his throat had been, wood splintering beneath the force. He came up fast, driving his shoulder into the attacker's chest, sending both of them crashing to the floor. They struggled in silence, breath harsh, bodies colliding with practiced violence. Alaric disarmed him quickly. Too quickly to be random. When he twisted the man's arm and forced him face down, recognition hit like a blow. One of his guards. "Why?" Alaric demanded, voice lethal. The man trembled. "I was trying to save us." Alaric released him with a shove that sent him scrambling backward. Guards flooded the room moments later, alerted by the struggle. "Confine him," Alaric ordered. "Alone." When the room cleared, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a sickening realization. This wasn't fear anymore. It was conviction. They would keep coming. By morning, rumors spread faster than fire in dry brush. Some claimed Elyra had bewitched him. Others whispered she was a spy sent to weaken the pack before an outside attack. A few dared to suggest she was the prophecy made flesh, ruin with a human face. Elyra heard them. Course she did. She found Alaric at the forge, where the heat masked tension and the hammering drowned out eavesdroppers. He was sharpening a blade he hadn't used in years, movements controlled, jaw set. "You didn't tell me they tried to kill you," she said. He didn't look up. "I didn't want you carrying that." Her laugh was short, humorless. "You think I'm not already carrying enough?" He stopped, finally meeting her gaze. The forge light caught in her eyes, illuminating exhaustion and something dangerously close to guilt. "This was my choice," she said. "Staying. Being seen with you." "Yes," he said quietly. "And it's my responsibility." She stepped closer, voice lowering. "They won't stop, Alaric. I know. They think removing me will save them. I won't let that happen." Her lips pressed together. "You can't protect me from belief." The truth of that sat heavy between them. That evening, the second betrayal revealed itself, not with violence but with precision. The storehouse burned. Not the main one, the one Elyra had been staying near. Flames devoured supplies meant for winter, smoke curling into the sky like a warning. No one was hurt, but the message was unmistakable. This is what happens when you defy fate. The pack gathered, fear and anger twisting together. Fingers pointed. Voices rose. Alaric stood before them, power radiating from him like heat. "This ends now," he said, voice carrying. "Anyone who acts against my word acts against me." Murmurs rippled. "And what if your word is the curse?" someone shouted. Question cut deep. Alaric scanned the crowd, searching faces he'd known since childhood. He saw doubt. He saw fear. He saw people desperate for certainty, even if that certainty promised destruction. Elyra stood at the edge of the gathering, watching him, not with expectation but with resolve. She did not ask him to choose her. That made the choice heavier. "I am your alpha," he said, "not your omen." The crowd slowly dispersed, But the damage lingered. Lines had been drawn, even if no one dared cross them openly yet. Later, alone in his quarters, Elyra finally let the composure slip. "They hate me," she said, voice breaking just enough to be real. "They're afraid," Alaric replied, "of losing the story that explains their suffering." She looked at him then, eyes shining. "And you?" He hesitated. "I'm afraid of losing you." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Elyra crossed the room and rested her forehead against his chest. He froze for half a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, tentative at first, then firm. The contact grounded him in a way nothing else ever had. "This isn't just about us," she said softly. "Whatever this is, it's changing things. I know. And they'll make us pay for it." He pressed his lips to her hair, breathing her in. "Then we'll pay together." Outside, the night listened. The prophecy, ancient and cruel, tightened its grip, not in triumph but in warning. Because love, once chosen, was no longer predictable. And treachery was only the beginning. Hope was not a thing that arrived gently. It came like a blade pulled from a wound, sharp, painful, and immediately dangerous. Elyra held the ledger as if it might dissolve in her hands, eyes locked on the faint margin note that had shifted the ground beneath everything they thought they knew. The words were simple, almost careless, and yet they burned hotter than the prophecy carved in stone. The prophecy binds only those who believe they have no choice. Alaric read it again, slower this time, as if meaning might rearrange itself if he looked hard enough. "This could mean anything," he said finally. "It means responsibility," Elyra replied. "Which is why they hid it." They sat in the archive chamber, a room so rarely used it smelled of dust and neglect. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer now, angrier. The land was not waiting patiently anymore. It was demanding resolution. "If this is true," Alaric said, "then everything I've done to protect them, every distance I kept, helped fulfill the prophecy," Elyra finished softly. The realization landed with brutal clarity. Isolation, fear, obedience. Each choice he'd made to avoid catastrophe had tightened the noose instead. Not because the prophecy required it, but because belief shaped behavior and behavior shaped outcome. "They turned inevitability into control," Elyra said. "If you think ruin is certain, you stop fighting it." Alaric leaned back, dragging a hand over his face. Leadership had taught him to absorb blame without flinching, but this was different. This was the knowledge that his restraint, his loneliness, had not been noble, had been useful to them. "But belief alone won't stop a flood or heal a sick child," he said quietly. "No," Elyra agreed. "But it can stop people from choosing the worst solution because it feels ordained." Sacrifice. The word had begun to stalk the pack openly now. It passed from mouth to mouth with reverence, as if cruelty became sacred when wrapped in tradition. Someone had already suggested a binding ritual. Another had whispered about blood. Alaric's blood, or hers. The debate came that evening, as the council gathered under torchlight, faces carved from shadow and fear. Elyra stood beside Alaric, not behind him, not hidden, visible by choice. Marek spoke first. "The signs intensify. The mountain has shifted again. The child worsens." "He will live," Elyra said sharply, "if you let the healer work." Marek's gaze flicked to her. "You presume much." "I presume nothing," she replied. "I observe." Alaric felt the tension coil. He stepped forward. "We found something that earned their attention. A record," he continued, "older than the current prophecy. It suggests what we've treated as fate is conditional." Murmurs rippled. "Convenient," one councilman scoffed. "Dangerous," another said. "You'd gamble the pack on an interpretation." Marek's voice cut through them all. "Choice has always been part of the prophecy. The Alpha chooses love. That is what damns us." "No," Elyra said. "The Alpha chooses fear. That's what damns you." Silence fell hard. You want certainty, she went on. You want a death you can point to and say, this saved us. But you don't want to ask who benefits from keeping you obedient. That's enough, Marek snapped. Alaric raised a hand. No. Let her speak. Elyra's gaze never wavered. If belief binds the prophecy, then unmaking that belief weakens it. Not through denial, but through action. And what action do you propose? Marek demanded. Elyra inhaled slowly. A choice made openly. Without sacrifice. Without blood. Laughter broke out, sharp, disbelieving. You would defy the prophecy publicly? Someone asked. Invite its wrath. Yes, Alaric said. The word echoed. I will, he continued. Because leadership that relies on fear is already a failure. Marek stood, trembling with fury. You would doom us all. Or free you, Elyra said quietly. The council dissolved without resolution. That was worse than refusal. Uncertainty bred rashness. That night, Elyra and Alaric argued. Not softly, not carefully. You're asking them to give up the only explanation they have for their suffering, Alaric said, pacing. People cling to meaning harder than truth. And you're asking me to stand beside you while they decide whether I'm expendable, Elyra shot back. I won't let them touch you. You can't promise that. The words cracked between them, raw and real. Elyra's composure finally shattered, fear spilling through the fractures. I don't want to be brave, she said, voice breaking. I just don't want to die because someone else needs a story to survive. Alaric crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. This time there was no hesitation. No restraint. I choose you, he said into her hair. Not as destiny. Not as defiance. As a man. The words felt like a vow and a rebellion. She held him fiercely, as if anchoring him to the world. Then we do this together. Outside, the storm broke in earnest. Rain lashed the settlement, thunder tearing the sky open. Somewhere in the chaos a horn sounded, one long, urgent note. Something's happening, Elyra said. Iran. The northern ridge had shifted again, sending debris into the lower dwellings. Panic tore through the pack. Alaric moved instinctively, shouting orders, pulling people from danger, bloodied but unbroken. Elyra worked beside him, fearless, hands steady as she bound wounds and calmed the terrified. And the world did not end. No sudden cataclysm followed his choice. No divine punishment. Just disaster, real, brutal, human. When the storm finally eased, the damage was undeniable. But so was something else. They had survived without sacrifice. The realization spread slowly, dawning in exhausted faces. The prophecy had predicted annihilation. Instead there was loss but also resilience. Elyra met Alaric's gaze across the ruined square, rain-soaked and breathing hard. For the first time belief wavered. And in that crack hope took root, fragile, forbidden and alive. The prophecy did not loosen its grip. But it faltered. And for something ancient and cruel, that was the beginning of fear. Belief does not collapse all at once. It fractures. In the days after the storm, the pack moved through the ruins of their settlement with a quiet that felt reverent rather than defeated. Roofs were rebuilt with shared hands. The injured healed under Elyra's steady care. Food was scarce, tempers shorter, but no one died to appease the prophecy. That mattered. Alaric saw it in the way people looked at him now. Not with devotion, not with fear, but with something far more volatile. Consideration. Certainty had been taken from them, and in its place was choice. Choice made people dangerous. By the 3rd day, allies began to surface. Not loudly, not all at once, but in deliberate acts of alignment. A hunter who refused an elder's order to watch Elyra. A council aide who quietly returned a confiscated text to the archive. A healer who spoke aloud, for the first time, that the child's fever had broken without divine intervention. Small rebellions. Human ones. Elyra noticed them before Alaric did. They're choosing, she said one evening as they stood overlooking the settlement, fires flickering back to life below. Even if they don't know what they're choosing yet. Alaric's mouth tightened. Choice invites consequence. Yes, she agreed. That's what makes it real. Not everyone welcomed that reality. Marek had not spoken since the storm. That silence worried Alaric more than any argument ever had. The elder was not a man who surrendered belief quietly. He understood power too well for that. The warning came at dawn. A runner arrived breathless, eyes wide. The southern clans, he said. They're gathering. Armed. Alaric swore under his breath. The southern clans had always respected the prophecy. Feared it. Their leaders had lost kin during the last so-called fulfillment. If word had reached them that the Alpha was defying fate, they would not see it as courage. They would see it as contagion. They think we're inviting ruin, Elyra said. They think they're stopping it, Alaric replied. The gathering was swift and tense. Alaric called those he trusted. Fighters, healers, thinkers, people who had already proven they could act without hiding behind myth. It was not a large group. It was enough. They may demand sacrifice, one warrior said. Or your abdication. Neither will be given, Alaric said. And if they attack, then we defend, he replied. Not the prophecy. Not pride. People. Elyra stepped forward. And we speak. That earned a few skeptical looks. Belief spreads faster than steel, she continued. If we don't confront it, it will always come back sharper. Alaric met her gaze. He trusted her with his life. That, he realized, had already happened. The southern clans arrived under a bruised sky, banners snapping in the wind. Their leaders dismounted as one, faces set with grim resolve. Marek stood among them. Betrayal unveiled at last. You summoned them, Alaric said quietly. Marek did not deny it. You've endangered us all. I did what leadership demanded. No, Elyra said, stepping beside Alaric. You did what fear demanded. The confrontation unfolded like a drawn bowstring. Taut, inevitable. Accusations flew. The prophecy was recited like law. Alaric was named the catalyst of destruction, Elyra its instrument. Then Alaric spoke. He did not shout. He did not posture. He told them what he had done, what he had chosen, how the storm had come, and how they had survived without blood payment. This is not defiance for its own sake, he said. It is responsibility. I will no longer kill in the name of a story that feeds on obedience. Murmurs rippled. Anger. Curiosity. One of the southern leaders stepped forward. And when the final sign comes, Alaric didn't look away. Then we face it together. Or we die knowing we chose how. The silence that followed was heavy. The storm clouds gathered again, low and fast. Wind tore through the valley, banners snapping violently. The land itself seemed to hold its breath. Elyra felt it then, a pressure building not outside but within. As if the prophecy, wounded and cornered, was preparing its final argument. This isn't over, she whispered. No, Alaric agreed. It's beginning. Thunder cracked overhead, closer than ever. The storm had gathered, and this time it would demand everything. The dawn came heavy with smoke and ash. Alaric had spent the night walking the perimeter of the settlement, boots sinking into mud churned by rain and rubble. The southern clans had not retreated. They had circled, patient predators waiting for a flaw, for a slip in his defenses, for a moment when fear outweighed loyalty. Every hour that passed added weight to his shoulders, the prophecy whispering in every crack of stone and puddle of water. Elyra met him at the eastern wall, rain dripping from her hair. She carried a bundle of herbs, a satchel of remedies, yet her eyes were storm-cloud gray, as if the burden of the prophecy had settled on her shoulders as heavily as on his. They'll push, she said softly. They'll demand blood. Alaric nodded. And we'll give them none. But it won't matter if we lose ourselves first. She approached, hand brushing his arm, not seeking comfort but grounding. We have a choice. He stared at her. That simple truth, the freedom the prophecy had never offered, shone brighter than the rising sun. At what cost? Her lips pressed together, indecision and resolve clashing. Everything. Alaric's heart tightened. He had prepared for death, for destruction, for losing everything but himself. He had not prepared for this, the gnawing realization that survival meant a sacrifice of something deeper, something infinitely more personal. "They'll demand the child," she whispered, voice trembling. "Or me. Or you." He shook his head. "I won't let them." "You can't protect them from belief," she said again, the words bitter true. "Only from choice." Alaric swallowed. He knew she was right. To resist fully, to defy the prophecy, required more than courage. It demanded a willingness to surrender, not to the enemy but to the stakes themselves. A horn sounded from the ridge. The southern clans moved like shadows cast by lightning, swift, organized, resolute. Alaric gathered his allies, those who had already chosen him, chosen truth over fear. Warriors armed, healers prepared, and Elyra at his side. Their eyes met once, and in that brief contact, no words were needed. This was the moment. The culmination of defiance, of hope. The battle unfolded as if the world itself had conspired to test their resolve. Arrows flew, clashing against shields. The ground shook under the weight of charging hooves and pounding feet. Screams and shouts tangled with thunder, a symphony of chaos and will. Amid the melee, Alaric found himself facing the southern leader, a man whose hands were stained with the blood of those who had believed too easily in fate. Their blades met, steel against steel, sparks flying with each strike. The clash was not just physical but symbolic, a confrontation between story and choice, destiny and free will. Elyra was a whirlwind nearby, tending the injured, redirecting chaos, her presence a beacon of unyielding clarity. She moved with purpose, her decisions shaping survival, bending what could have been annihilation into opportunity. But then it came, the impossible choice. The mountain ridge, already weakened by the storm and past collapses, groaned ominously. A section of earth above threatened to fall, aimed directly at the center of the settlement. Panic rippled, and for the first time, Alaric saw the full weight of the prophecy. Not in words, not in whispers, but in looming death. He could save the pack. But to do so, someone had to hold the earth's collapse at bay, to anchor it while others fled. Elyra saw it too. Her hand found his mid-fight, eyes wide with recognition. No, he interrupted. "This is my responsibility." She shook her head. "We do this together." The choice crystallized in that heartbeat. One of them could sacrifice life for the many, or both could risk everything, challenging the prophecy outright. Alaric made his decision. Together, hands entwined, they pushed against the debris, their bodies straining, wills fused. The earth gave, splintered, cracked, but the two of them held, moving inch by inch, diverting stone and rubble from crushing the gathered pack below. Pain lanced through them, every muscle screaming, lungs burning. The world narrowed to grit, sweat, and the heartbeat of defiance. And then a tremor, sharper, sudden. Alaric stumbled. Elyra caught him, anchoring, forcing the rhythm of their strength to sink. For a terrifying moment it seemed impossible. But impossibility was a story. Together they endured. Finally, with a last, collective heave, the mountain settled just enough. The pack below fled to safety. The ridge above groaned but did not collapse entirely. Bloodied, soaked, trembling with exhaustion, Alaric and Elyra fell to their knees, bodies bruised, hearts pounding like war drums. They had survived. And yet, the cost was etched into their very bones. Pain, raw and intimate, carved itself into memory, a testament to the weight of choice, the price of love, and the danger of rewriting destiny. Elyra pressed her forehead against his chest. "We did it," she whispered. Alaric's arms circled her. "Together," he murmured. The wind carried their triumph into the mountains. The prophecy had demanded sacrifice, and they had given it, Not life, not blood, but courage. Not one of them broken, but all of them changed. Above, the sky split with the last lightning of the storm. And for the first time the world seemed to exhale. The ultimate sacrifice had not been death. Had been defiance. The morning after the storm was deceptively calm. The settlement lay in tentative quiet, smoke still curling from collapsed walls and scorched earth, yet no screams pierced the air. Alaric moved through the ruins, eyes scanning every face. Warriors, children, elders alike. Survival had spared them, but it had also exposed the raw truth of choice. Defiance had consequences, even if victory was possible. Elyra moved beside him, mud streaking her clothes, hair tangled from the night's exertion. There was no softness in her expression, only determination. She had held him up, literally and metaphorically, when the ridge threatened to collapse, and her presence now reminded him of the fragile humanity that could triumph over destiny. "Are they accepting it?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "They're listening," she said. "That's the first step." He turned toward the council, who were gathered by the partially rebuilt hall. Faces were tight with suspicion, awe, and fear. Merrick's gaze was unreadable, like granite, weathered by centuries of authority and disappointment. "You've defied the prophecy," he said at last. "And the world still turns. Why?" Alaric's jaw clenched. "Because prophecies are only as strong as the belief that feeds them. You believed we had no choice. We did." A murmur ran through the council. Others whispered among themselves, some defiance in their tones, others relief. Alaric knew that moments like this, the fragile tipping point between obedience and autonomy, were more dangerous than any battle. "And yet," Marek pressed, "the mountain still shifts, the crops fail, and the child nearly died. Can love truly undo destiny?" Elyra stepped forward, shoulders squared. "It isn't about undoing. It's about facing it differently. You tried to contain fate with fear, obedience, and sacrifice. That only fulfilled the prophecy. We chose courage together. That's what changes everything." The words struck harder than any weapon. There was silence, a pause thick with realization. Outside, the wind stilled, as if the land itself was listening. Alaric raised his voice, commanding without yelling, powerful in calm authority. "We have the chance to write our own legacy. Not as pawns, not as victims, but as people who decide, who act, who love without apology." Shifted. Doubt met curiosity. Fear met hope. Then came the final test. From the Treeline, a scout returned with news. The southern clans were withdrawing, but they demanded a demonstration of trust, a declaration that Alaric would protect the mate who had defied their expectations. Alaric glanced at Elyra. No words were needed. Their fingers intertwined, fingers curling into a silent oath. "I will protect her," he declared. "Not because prophecy demands it, but because she is mine to choose. And I will fight anyone, any story, any belief that says otherwise." The southern clans hesitated, then bowed slightly in acknowledgement. The grip of fear loosened. The pack began to murmur in disbelief, then cautious approval. Elyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You did it," she said softly. "No," Alaric corrected. "We did it." The true challenge, however, was not victory over enemies or prophecy. It was the reckoning within themselves. Years of solitude, fear, and self-imposed isolation had left wounds that could not be ignored. And yet, through fire and storm, through betrayal and terror, they had found each other. Love, forged in defiance, was a force stronger than expectation. Alaric and Elyra stood together at the edge of the settlement, surveying the damage and the lives they had saved. The horizon was bathed in fragile sunlight, golden streaks illuminating mud-slick streets and splintered roofs. Somewhere in that light they glimpsed possibility, survival not dictated by ancient words, but carved by human hands. Alaric exhaled, feeling the weight of centuries lift slightly from his shoulders. "We have rewritten a story," he said. But we are not finished. We have to live it every day. Elyra nodded. And we will. Together. The wind carried the declaration across the valley. Birds rose from shattered nests, wings beating in unison, echoing the defiance of two people who had chosen love over doom, choice over inevitability. For the first time, the prophecy did not loom like a threat. It was a shadow they had faced and bent, not broken, but bent enough to allow light to enter. The battle had been fought. Survival was claimed. The question that lingered now was deeper. Could love truly rewrite destiny, or had they only delayed the inevitable? Only time would answer. But for now, in that fragile dawn, redemption had a voice. And ruin had not won. The settlement awoke to a quiet that was almost sacred. Sunlight filtered through the broken timbers, casting long stripes across the mud and stone. Smoke from the previous night's fires lingered, but it no longer carried the sharp tang of panic. The pack moved among the ruins with a careful, deliberate rhythm, rebuilding not just homes but trust, courage, and purpose. Alaric walked the streets with Elyra at his side. His hands were calloused, his clothes still damp from the night's storm, but his eyes held something they had not held in years: clarity. The prophecy, once a shadow hanging over every breath, had been confronted, tested, and, though not destroyed, rendered pliable by their choices. The pack no longer whispered behind closed doors. They watched, listened, and slowly learned. They had seen fear defeated not by obedience, but by courage. And in that lesson, Alaric and Elyra's legacy was already taking root. Children ran past them, laughing, carrying splintered fragments of fallen doors as pretend shields. Warriors sharpened blades with calm determination instead of anxiety. Elders spoke with deliberation rather than urgency. Their words weighed with experience, not fear. And somewhere in the air, the prophecy's grip, while never entirely gone, felt lighter, like the first breath after a storm. Alaric turned to Elyra. "It's not over," he said, voice low but steady. "The world doesn't bend so easily, and there will always be those who fear choice." Elyra smiled faintly, the curve of her lips soft but resolute. "Then we keep bending it. One choice at a time. One moment at a time. Together." They reached the ruins of the ridge, the mountain still scarred from the storm's fury. Alaric placed a hand on the jagged stone, feeling its heat from the sun, its weight, its history. "The prophecy shaped this land," he said, voice almost a whisper. "But it doesn't control it. And it doesn't control us." Elyra leaned against him, eyes scanning the horizon where survivors worked to reclaim what had been lost. "We are not pawns," she said. "Not stories waiting to be fulfilled. We are authors of our own fate." Marek approached, slow, deliberate, face unreadable. The elder's steps carried the weight of centuries, yet he stopped before them, head bowed in acknowledgement rather than challenge. "You've done more than survive," he said quietly. "You've changed the way we see choice and consequence." Alaric's gaze met Marek's. "I did what I had to do. Not for prophecy. Not for glory. For them. For all of us. And for her," Elyra added softly. The elder nodded. "Then let the record show. History will remember that courage is not absence of fear, but defiance of it. That love can carve paths through even the darkest predictions." Beyond the settlement, the land seemed to exhale. The river flowed full again, winding silver through the valley. Crops bent toward the sun instead of the shadow of inevitability. Wolves howled on distant ridges, their voices carrying not threat but life. Alaric took Elyra's hand, fingers entwined, a gesture simple yet powerful, a symbol of the bond that had defied centuries of expectation. "What now?" he asked. "Now," she said, tilting her head to meet his eyes. "We live it. All of it. Every choice, every moment, every heartbeat. And we make them count." A breeze swept through the valley, rustling leaves and lifting the scent of earth and rain. Somewhere far off a child laughed. Somewhere near, a warrior stood tall. Somewhere in the pack life moved forward. The prophecy had demanded darkness. They had faced it, reshaped it, and survived. The story of Alaric and Elyra, the alpha and the mate who refused fate, would echo across generations. Not as a warning, but as proof that destiny is not absolute, that love is not weakness, and that choice, above all, is the most potent form of rebellion. Alaric's gaze fell on the horizon, golden and infinite. "We've rewritten the legacy," he murmured. "And it's ours." Elyra rested her head against his shoulder. "And nothing can take it from us," she said. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Alaric believed it. The wind carried their laughter across the valley, mingling with the songs of birds and the murmurs of life reborn. The prophecy had been faced, its shadow endured, and its grip loosened. The world would continue to challenge them, to test them, to tempt them, but now they faced it as one. And together they would endure. The Alpha's curse had been heavy, the prophecy cruel, but love had rewritten it. And the legacy of choice, of defiance, of courage, of hope would live on.